Hello, here we are once again. It's Robert Vaughn and Alex Jewell, the DeFi Collective. And we have a great show today. We're going to have a conversation about everything that people are talking about now when it comes to decentralized finance, which is cryptocurrency, how there's an attempt to manipulate it, how the governments are reacting to it. There's a lot of money in crypto now. And anytime you have a lot of money, people want to control it. It's like the music business, the TV business, the cable business. Anytime there are billions of dollars at stake, you're going to have an attempt on certain parties to control it, namely most governments, because they see it as a revenue stream, and that's how they see it, and they want to take control of it. Governments, I just heard today, I guess India had outlawed crypto, but now it's not outlawed anymore. So I guess every year, they get down on crypto and they say, oh, you know what? It's not that bad. We can sell. Hopefully this will be the last time they have to outlaw crypto, because decentralized finance and cryptocurrency is here to stay. If you look at all the different currencies around the world, crypto is about as stable as any of them. Obviously, there are fluctuations. But there are fluctuations with the dollar, and most of the other currencies are not really universally accepted, other than the dollar, because every country's currency is manipulated by them. One thing that I see that there's a trend now, I guess Ethiopia has made, is it Cardano, the currency for the country. So yeah. This is pretty wild. It's the first time a country has said we're going to make our currency a cryptocurrency. So this gives the currency legitimacy. Now, if another country in Africa follows suit, or another country follows suit, pretty soon, you can get a pretty strong currency. So I'm going to ask Alex to talk a little bit about a lot of the things that have been going on with the governments and with big business. Like I said, anytime they see an opportunity, they see billions of dollars jumping off. They want in. So talk about that a little bit, Alex. Other than the fact that Goldman Sachs, they closed their crypto department, then they opened it back up last month.
Yeah, and they're talking about flip flopping, right?
Yeah. So go ahead, Alex. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So. This is such a common discussion because obviously governments, regulators have a huge impact on what we're allowed to do in the markets, what we have access to, how countries compete with each other, how their economies are structured, how the rich can line their pockets. These are really relevant subjects, especially for authoritarian regimes, right? For autocracies, this is a serious discussion. How much economic freedom can you give your people, and what sort of loopholes exist then once you open those up? And so you see countries like China, obviously, I feel like every year come out and attack crypto again. They did it more symbolically, randomly recently.
Excuse me, I'm going to jump in here for a minute, but where are most of the Bitcoin mining computers located?
There's a
China?
lot.
Is it China by chance? Is it China by chance?
There's a good amount in China. There's a lot in Russia. There's a lot in places like Siberia because the cost of electricity is very low. Okay. And of course, in the U.S., obviously the U.S. has.
Could they have a personal motive for bashing crypto?
Okay. Yeah. So obviously, a country like China requires a lot of control, not just over economic concerns and visibility, right? Because their power comes from them knowing everything everybody does, establishing even like scores around people's quality as human beings. And so if they don't have control over that, then that's a serious threat to their power. that's democratization, and democratization is not what an autocracy is going for, right? And so decentralization is considered even a threat to, more democratic systems like the US, because our economy still runs and profits. It works for the rich. And so when they see threats to that, when, large banking institutions see, oh, anybody can go and get 6% APY when they're offering, I think the average is like,
froze up on me, Alex. Let's see.
sorry, my internet's dropped today, so I'm now tethered on my phone. So
Okay.
hopefully I
Okay.
don't drop again. But yeah, so you look at like what a savings account is now, 0.4% or something. I mean, that's less. What is inflation this year? 2.5% and conservatively. So you're literally losing money storing money in traditional banks. And so this is a serious threat to the traditional systems that have the lobbyists and have the people on the boards and have the people in political positions. And so even in democracy, this is a serious discussion. Of course, they frame it like, what are we going to do about crime? Their framing of how they regulate crypto is that they want to prevent it from being used for criminal activity. But the reality is that most criminal activity and the most untraceable money is still regular currency.
$100 bills, man, Benjamins.
100%. Most crime still happens using regular money.
Yeah,
and so
most drugs get bought with $100 bills, and most
no record of that, right? There's no there's no ledger, digital transparent ledger that shows where that money went, right? You could store it in walls, you could carry it in briefcases, you could pass it off anywhere. That's where a lot of crime happens. And when you look at like traditional banking systems, where are these cartels moving their money? Where have we seen the lawsuits every few years? All of this stuff happens with traditional banks. So, their argument that they're regulating crypto because of crime is hilarious, because they are claiming that a fully transparent ledger that everybody can look at and trace money through, that's more secure because of that, is somehow more dangerous for crime. That's just a cover up for the fact that their power is threatened by the use of it.
Well, I think they're threatened because DeFi really does reverse the flow of ownership. It puts ownership back in the hands of individual people. And banks. I got a letter the other day in the bank. They said, you're a great customer and you qualify for special rates. If you give us 100 grand, we'll give you a 1.87 to 2.5% interest. I'm like, and they called me. I said, "What do you guys? Is this like this really from the bank or just a scam?" I said, "What's going on?" But that was really the interest rate for $100,000, 2.5%. You could get, just for comparison's sake, you could get crypto. You could buy a cryptocurrency called the DAI, which is based on the dollar, and you could use that company and stake it and get 10% in some places.
Right. Yeah.
Why would I get 2% when I could get 10%? And the banks don't like it. They really don't like it. And there have been several attempts, and you might want to talk about this, by banks, governments, and individuals to attempt to manipulate the price of cryptocurrency. Can you talk about that a little bit, Alex?
Yeah. So because it's still a market, right? There's still the ability to short it. There's still the ability to affect the price when you have what are called whales, or people that buy large amounts, move large amounts around. You do see some suspicious activity. For example, a couple days ago, A whale moved like 104 or $184 million worth of Bitcoin from a Coinbase account to another Coinbase account of their own. And
They moved it to a wallet.
they moved it from a Coinbase account to a Coinbase account, which is not like it's a weird thing to do for somebody moving that amount of crypto.
Well,
right?
Not if you borrow the money, if you stake it and you borrow the money, then you don't have to pay tax on borrowed money.
It was Coinbase to Coinbase. So
Coinbase.
the difference there, yeah. So the problem there is that it's most likely just manipulation. It's somebody most likely just moving $184 million to make it look like they're going to sell it because they're moving it to Coinbase, when really they're just moving it around to create FUD, panic, and then they would probably have short orders.
And for our listeners that are not familiar with FUD, could you explain FUD? It's a pretty extensive concept.
Yeah. So FUD stands for So FUD is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's original. I think you would probably know more about its origins because I think it originated in sales, right? Sales, marketing, PR. It originated as like a force, essentially, that can be used as a strategy even to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt in order to sell things, right? In order to profit from it.
You deal with them one at a time, and when you're closing a sale, and when you get rid of those three things, there's no reason the person wouldn't buy from you. But those are the three reasons, not objections, but reasons that they don't buy from you. But that's what it is: fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Right. So we see that term coming up a lot now in crypto because there is obviously some manipulation going on with actual US dollar prices of some of these tokens. And when you, especially because there's been a lot of new retail. So the problem is that there's been a lot of new retail involvement in the market, regular consumers buying crypto for themselves out of the excitement because Elon Musk tweeted it, or because they finally listened to that cousin of theirs that's been talking about it for a long time, or whatever the case is. You have a large amount of, people who put their stimulus checks into it, or decided they lost a job. Maybe they moved their 401k into it, or whatever the case may be. And what's happening is this self-fulfilling prophecy. You have a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt created by manipulators in the market. You have a lot of panic selling from the retail investors. You have a lot of liquidations as a result. And when you have a lot of liquidations, the volume goes down, or the volume goes up in a negative direction, right? And then you have more people seeing that, and it creates this self-fulfilling prophecy of like panic selling that begets panic selling, and on down the line, right? What we don't see is institutional selling. What we see is a lot of institutions buying because they still see the long-term value. Obviously, the actual technology isn't going anywhere.
Something interesting, because when I look at financial systems and the market and bonds and how things work, sometimes things that may seem unrelated can mean a lot. For instance, I just got another a wallet, Ledger Nano X wallet, and I had to wait like 6 weeks.
Yep.
I had one. I wanted another one. I had to wait 6 weeks.
Yep.
So why do you think I had to wait 6 weeks?
Well, the reason
are being sold, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I think because that tells you that if a lot of people are buying wallets, digital wallets, there's a lot more activity. And I looked up another statistic. You can kind of overlay these, but the shortage in wallets corresponded with the PPP checks being issued. Every time there was a bunch of PPP checks go out, there was like a shortage of wallets. So
that's really interesting.
People are doing the PPP loans and putting it in crypto.
It could.
If you look at those two, they almost correspond.
That's interesting. Yeah,
it is very interesting. Yeah. So people are transferring crypto. They're moving crypto also from like Coinbase and other places to digital wallets.
Yeah.
because there's a shortage of them, and they're producing not more now than they ever have. So I don't think crypto is going away.
No. Yeah. And the institutional buying is increasing.
Right.
When you look at where the liquidations are coming from, it's quite obviously retail. It's regular consumers who are panicking because this is their first crypto. This is their first brush with the red candles.
Right.
But for a lot of us, I've been through this in 2015. I went through this in 2017, 2018. So 2014, 2015, 2017, 2018, these are all times that were actually worse than this. And so, we've been through this, and this is a part of growth, right? This is a part of, just like the dot-com bubble, you saw a lot of speculation, you saw a lot of manipulation, you saw companies that would suddenly double or quadruple in value just because they added .com to the name. You saw a lot of that, and there was a lot of people who even didn't understand it at the time. They're like, that's stupid, these companies are worthless, and some of them were, right? But what came out of the .com bubble obviously was technology that quite literally changed our entire existence, right? And so that's the important thing to remember, is that from these kinds of bubbles still comes the valuable technology itself. And that's why we keep talking about understanding that underlying technology, understanding what it offers you and what it changes about the economy and the internet, because that's the important thing to focus on when you're putting your money into something.
Right. Yeah. Also, we've seen a lot of government attempted manipulation, because when a government says something, that can shake the market.
Yeah.
When they can say, "Oh, Bitcoin sucks," and everybody sells Bitcoin, and then Joe Biden says, "Oh yeah, I just spent $100,000 in Bitcoin. It's great. I think it's going up," and they don't say it exactly in those words.
Right.
They can do certain things to let you know whether they favor crypto or not. And like for instance, India today, they unbanned crypto.
Right.
Now, that sends a message that they think they're kind of like, okay, we're on the side of crypto now.
Right.
Goldman Sachs just reopened their crypto department. They also, to their whale customers, they have the opportunity to put part of their portfolio in crypto.
Right.
And I think it's up to 20% that they'll do.
Yep.
But, when a company like that, and this isn't something that's common knowledge to everybody, or they would want everybody to know, because they want the whales, if there's going to be, if my company's going public and I'm going to place, offering through 3 or 4 different companies, they're going to let their top customers know about it, because they get a percentage of the cut. So they're going to let the people know about it who can drop $50 to $100 million before everybody else knows about it. And usually by the time everybody else finds out about it, it's too late. And I think it's the same with crypto. People, like you say, you see $183 million move from over here to over here. I mean, that's nothing. And then too, see, I think a lot of this, since it's new, a lot of these could be data scientists writing programs to kind of try to develop a pattern, see what happens. What happens if I do this? Because a lot of that information is not available. For instance, they know, what happens if you, if you short GameStop. We kind of know what happens then.
Right.
You've got 4 million people they go long on it and said, no, we think it's going up. You said, I think it's going down. We know what happens when that happens. So I think, could this be an attempt to maybe kind of see what it does, or see how they can manipulate it, and maybe they can't. Maybe they find that it's not as easy to manipulate as a stock, because stocks, if most main traders, they look at the stock price, but more than that, they look at the volume, because that really tells you where the money's going. I think the same thing with crypto. The price of Bitcoin is down, but still the volume, 80% of the volume is people buying.
Right.
So,
Right.
there's
The
doesn't
Bitcoin conference is starting and it's packed. I mean, I mean, a lot of these banks have people there right now at the Bitcoin conference, right? They have staff there to like figure out what the hell's going on. And so, this is, I think it's really important to remember that there could be some manipulation in terms of like what happens. There's definitely people who have already developed like trading bots and things like that to like play with it. What we have to realize too is that with this recent dip, I mean, it significantly dipped pretty quickly after the catalyst with Elon Musk and China's announcement. And all of the stable coins remain stable, even the ones that are backed by cryptocurrencies, because you still saw liquid, because these are highly liquid assets. They're extremely liquid. We don't have issues like we have with stocks or dollars where they're just sort of based in, speculation. Some of these cryptocurrencies are, and you can see that reflected in their price charts. You see them launch and they immediately do this, and then it kind of dies off, and then you see like another exciting thing happen and they do this and then they kind of die off, right? They look like a heart monitor. But the valuable assets, things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, you might have like ups and downs in between, but overall these things are continuing to be,
rise. Yeah, yeah.
they're
Bitcoin,
continuing to be appreciating assets.
right.
And that's really important to remember. So all the stable coins remain stable. Some exchanges did have some outages briefly, but all of the DeFi protocols remain liquid, remain active, didn't have delays. So this entire distributed network, I mean, we're talking over, billions and billions and billions of dollars remained active, and people had full utility and activity despite that amount of drop. If our stock market had that drop collectively across the market, it would be catastrophic. Our market drops 4% and people panic, right? So this was actually a really valuable test to show just how important these technologies are and how durable they are.
Okay. A 50, 80%, 100% drop is really not unusual. If you look at the history of Bitcoin, there's usually a 90 to 110% drop before there's a surge, which would have meant that 30 grand was probably the floor. And I don't want to get into numbers, but because but it's not unusual to have a 50 to 100% drop,
right,
before a rise.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Because there's no government to print money or buy bonds or sell bonds or to say certain things or to open the gas reserves. There are a lot of things that governments do to manipulate the stock market and keep it strong.
Right.
And obviously they like to do the same thing with decentralized finance, cryptocurrency, but that's not possible like it was. And this is what we mean when we talk about reversing the flow of ownership.
Right.
That I can take my money now, buy a stable coin that's based on the dollar and get 10% interest all day long.
Right.
If you got if you got a decent sized portfolio, you're gonna, you just make money.
Yeah.
Not only will you get the interest, but as the coin increases in value, you're gonna make even more money.
Yeah. And the other thing that I'll say too is that these countries coming out with these announcements, it affects price, but a lot of these announcements are symbolic, because the fact is that they can't actually stop their people unless they completely shut down the internet, right? Even in North Korea, there's still cryptocurrency happening to people who have been able to sneak internet, right? And so unless a country like China shuts down the internet, which they're not going to do, they literally cannot stop people from using cryptocurrency quietly and anonymously.
And besides, if
And
they shut down the internet, they couldn't hack a meat factory.
right, they would not have their economy that they rely on, right? And this is critical. The other thing that I'll mention is that when we think about the price drop, we're still thinking about that price in US dollars.
Mhm.
And that's where the difference is, because something like the US dollar is a depreciating asset. When we talk about inflation rates, 2.5 to 10% this upcoming year, that means that I'm going to have less dollars. And that's a problem. Whereas one Bitcoin will always be one Bitcoin, right? It's an appreciating asset.
Mhm.
It's there's never going to be more of them. It's not going to be deflationary in terms of we're adding more Bitcoins.
Mhm.
It's the same number. One Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. And so if we start thinking outside of our existing economies that don't work, if we start thinking outside of our existing fiat currencies like the US dollar, and we start thinking about new currencies and new forms of value, new units of measurement, then we don't have to worry about what the US value, because let's say we do have inflation, right? Which we may have very steep inflation, more than what we've had before. If we have that, you're not going to want to be converting this stuff to dollars anyway. You know what I mean? You're going to want to be using the storage of value that isn't affected by that. And that's why when we say it's a hedge against that inflation, because it's deflationary or it's inflationary.
Saudi Arabia been kind of quiet on the financial front, but
Yeah.
word on the street is they're buying a lot of crypto.
Yep.
No dollars.
Yep.
Hedging their bets, exchanging dollars for crypto.
They're converting a lot. Yeah.
They know oil is going to go away eventually.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, could they be the crypto bank of the future?
Some of these countries, these oil-rich countries, are moving. They're desperately looking for new ventures.
Right.
It's why a lot of them have gotten into real estate and gotten into emerging technologies. It's very interesting actually, because a place like Dubai has turned into a almost like a Silicon Valley in the middle of the desert, right? And it's because oil they recognize as a finite resource that we're moving away from. Countries like Iran incentivize Bitcoin mining for, you talk about the regression of a country like Iran, the conservatism, it's a very tough country for many people to live in terms of government, the government and corruption and things like that. And obviously terrorism and things affect people's daily lives. And yet, even a government like that recognizes the power of them having a lot of Bitcoin and incentivizing people to mine it. So
why is the United States, in terms of economic theory, economic change, economic information, why are we almost like the last ones on the list to kind of figure things out? Because a lot of these people were educated at Wharton and University of Pennsylvania and Stanford and Harvard Business School.
Yeah.
They come up here to get educated in American, schools for economic, economic education. But it's like we're the last ones to kind of figure this stuff out. And it seems like we should kind of be ahead of the game. Is it because our population just isn't that bright, or because we don't teach things in school they should be teaching in school?
We've been defunding education for decades, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a combination of things. I think one, our economic system does tend to be very conservative, right? We've consistently for decades still been coping with the results of Reaganomics. Our economics, even for our left parties like the Democrats, it's essentially centrism to support the status quo, to support the institutions that have a lot of the government influence. And because of that, we've had a very stark separation between our technological advancement and our economic advancement, right? In fact, when you look at a place like Silicon Valley that feigns progressivism, you see a lot of conservative economics, right? You see people who are stockpiling wealth and not paying taxes and living lavishly with, you know, people a stone's throw away who can't even afford to live there anymore. This is not progressive economics, right? But they have very, very advanced technological advancement that's not bringing equality. And so you look at like a place like Harvard, you know, and where is blockchain being taught? Blockchain's being taught in the computer science programs. It's not being taught in the economic programs. And so that separation between where our progress is and where we put those investments because of who benefits from it, I think that's the problem. It's our compartmentalization of progress.
Progress. Okay. Yeah, because you know it's just like it's funny. You know, I talked to someone who had worked at as a data scientist, and they had previously in another life worked at Facebook, and they told me that a lot of things that go on at Facebook that a lot of the engineers that worked there didn't know for a long time what was happening in terms of the, you know, the data acquisition and the surveillance capitalism piece of it, and didn't know exactly how the algorithms were affecting people.
Yeah.
They knew how they worked, but they didn't know. You know, it's like, you know, you can explain the nuclear physics behind you know, fusion, but you know, you don't kind of like understand the implications. And I don't know if it's because they weren't educated enough, but I think a lot of times information is kept from people.
Yeah, it's very compartmentalized. You look at like the size of an organization like Facebook. And I've worked as an engineer at very large organizations before. I was in healthcare before. And so you look at like, okay, let's say I get a ticket and I'm adding a feature to an app. I might have analytics for that feature that I need to report. Okay. But we have like analytics platforms that are already integrated into an app. And maybe we're adding a data point for this click and a data point for this new banner and a data, you know, we're maybe for our like small piece of the puzzle of that ticket we're working on, we have to report those things, and it's just part of the ticket. And you don't, as that engineer, you don't have visibility of the larger picture of how those data points are used.
Right.
So let's say in healthcare is a good example. Let's say in healthcare, I'm working on a Medicare website and I'm, you know, using those data points to say, oh, this senior citizen clicked on this gym, or like lives near in this zip code, or put in a search for this. I don't, you know, those things may end up being used to affect which drug prices they see, or like which pharmacy they're recommended, or which doctors they're recommended, right? And those things, that bigger picture might have a serious implication in terms of how it affects somebody's quality of life or quality of care that I, as an engineer, have no visibility on, right? I just contributed my piece of the puzzle, finish my ticket, test pass, move on, right? And that's a serious issue, because what, you know, when you don't have that visibility of larger like product roadmap and what those implications are in terms of how it affects people's daily lives, because, you know, some higher up VP somewhere else is making arbitrary decisions on that data, you know, that's where you see a disconnect, right? I mean, a lot of terrible things in history have happened because each person just focused on their one job, and all those jobs together created catastrophe, but that each individual person had no clue, right?
Right.
So
I had a professor. He was also my boss, and he worked in research. And you know, I was a lot younger, and he was telling me about the stock market. And you know, I used to do point figure charts for him. This was before the days of computers and all kinds of stuff like that. And I said, well, when do you know how to sell? I said, when do you know when to sell? I said, what are some of the cues that you know when to get rid of a stock? He said, well, if a company begins to become socially conscious, he says, definitely a sell. I said, no. You're just kidding, right? He said, no. He said, I mean it. He said, if they become socially conscious and start to worry about how what they're doing is affecting people, it's time to sell. You know, I was like, oh, okay. So I think that kind of train of thought still lingers around today, where people, you know, they don't know, and everything is so compartmentalized that you don't really know, you know, what you're doing, you know. A lot of times I had a chemistry professor once that said he was at the University of Illinois and he worked on the enrichment process for uranium hexafluoride. Now, he didn't know it was going to be used in a bomb, but his job was to use reverse osmosis and let them know how many times they had to run it through to reach a certain level. That was just something he did as a scientist, but
Right.
he didn't know that that's why they were doing it. Of course, he found out later, but I think a lot of times, with data, manipulation, data analytics, surveillance capitalism, do you think a lot of that is happening today where people are kind of like in one compartment, or some of these companies are just so big that's just impossible to know the whole picture? You think that's true?
Yeah, I do. Um, I think that there's even like a subconscious recognition. Let's say there's an engineer at Facebook who might have like a subconscious recognition or like a back burner recognition that there's maybe like a larger picture that's not the best.
Right.
But they're getting paid handsomely. They're accumulating Facebook stock. They've got like a really cool Facebook Messenger bag, and they get in and they do their job, and they might even get promoted and to principal next year or whatever. Like they have snacks endlessly around them, and you look at like their corner of the world is so comfortable in the high society of Silicon Valley. Well, I mean,
don't rock the boat.
what's their motivation to care, right?
Yeah.
Not if everybody cared about the tangible effect of the large organization they worked for on the world, nobody would have a job, right? I mean, we would kind of go back to little villages or something. You know what I mean? I mean, you look at like the company that owns your building you live in,
okay,
or the company that owns the building that your company's in, that you have to scan into every day, or the company that you have dentist and your dental insurance through, or your health insurance. Like the fact is that we have to think systematically, and we can't think individually about each system and like what to protest and what to tear down, right?
Right.
We have to think overall in a system. How do we create a better system where we can prevent some of these things from happening again, right? Or we can like weed them out. We can start redesigning how we have ownership. Because if we focus on every individual instance, like, oh, where I work, I don't agree with this part of what they're doing, or I think this has bad effects, that's not going to go well, right? It's whack-a-mole. Yeah. You're going to go work somewhere else and find something else that's wrong.
So sometimes I wonder if integrity and making a ton of money, if you can do both, if you can be an integrous person and you can make a ton of money.
I think the problem is like what's a ton of money, right?
Well, I'm saying, you can reach a point where your money works for you and you don't have to work for your money. That's a ton.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Right.
Does integrity, $1 billion, that's a ton of money, a couple $1 billion.
Right.
Does integrity and a couple $1 billion, can they coexist?
I think traditionally, no. I mean, that's sort of the socialist argument against billionaires, right? Is like, in order to become a billionaire, you had to at some point turn off, you had to turn off that voice that was like, that's wrong. There's something wrong here, right? You look at somebody like Bezos, right, who's going to be the world's first trillionaire by 2026, and he just spent $500 million on another yacht, and yet his workers can't even unionize.
He chose a smaller yacht too. When he goes into ports that don't have a draw.
Right. This is not his first yacht. So is that okay, right? Like at what cost to other people did he achieve that? And that's a serious question, right? All because he put a bookstore online, right? Like,
I think the thing is that we don't, it's kind of like, I was talking with somebody and a young lady who's an artist in Denmark, and she kind of didn't really understand why football was so popular in America? I said, because football is like the ultimate team accomplishment because you've got 11 guys. This guy, all he has to do is hike the ball and block the person in front of him or turn him a certain way. This guy's got to run a route. This guy's got to pick up the guy with the guard pull from. And everybody has one specific job. The quarterback has to hand the ball off or you throw the ball. And I said, if one guy screws up, the play goes nowhere. But if everybody does their job, then you score a touchdown. And I told her, I said, and the reason people like football is because football is like any organization where, the organization can be successful, if everybody does their job. And then she said, well, a lot of people cheat, don't they? I said, no. Well, she said, I heard that so-and-so cheated. I say, well, I'm sure that goes on too, but, I think, in many different organizations, maybe it's not necessary for everybody to know everything, but when they don't, they're not able to make a qualified decision on whether they want to keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. That's a age-old question. Can be a good person and a rich person?
I think
Yeah.
like there's also, it's not so black and white, right? Because obviously there are rich people who use that for a lot of good.
Right.
Typically though, at some point they do sort of, the truth does come out at some point that it seems without fail. Look at Bill Gates right now, right? I mean, here for a long time.
People say, how could that happen, man? He's rich, but he's human.
Right. Yeah. There's an inherent disconnect there still of his ultimate goals as a billionaire versus how the general public perceives that sort of thing. Right. And that's a problem. Now, what I will say is that maybe there is a shift in terms of something like decentralization, allowing us to safely have wealth distribution. And perhaps some people do end up with more because they've had true ownership with smarter decisions to have access to things that they may not have had before. And perhaps that there's a way then, without having even room for corruption in blockchain, maybe there is room for people to be truly good and contribute back to the system because of their wealth, inherently by design, where there's good and wealth and exorbitant wealth together, right? I don't know. But I think there's more promise there than what we've currently got.
Yeah. I had a guy tell me one time he was pretty wealthy and he was a very conservative philosophy. And he said we were in a meeting. So take Bob, for instance, he wants to spread the wealth, He said, the only problem with that is they say in 5 years, we just have it all back again. I thought about it for a minute. I said, you're probably right. The people that were going to throw money away would throw it away. And the people that were, industrious would probably save it and figure out ways to make more. So I don't know, within the system, a system is the rules of the game, so I don't know if you can, sort of like basketball, man. If you're 7'3", you can touch the net, you probably got a better chance of dunking than me and you.
Right. Well, when I got into crypto early, it was because of privileges that I even knew about it early, right? It's because of where I went to school and who my roommate ended up being and his who he knew because of his wealthy family and those kinds of things all lined up at, in a series of privileges. When I'm honest about it, the reason I found out about it and the reason I even had disposable income to begin with in college to risk in something that I didn't know anything about yet is because of those privileges. And so recognizing that even with a decentralized system, the early adoption that's made a lot of people wealthy often came from white dudes in tech, right? This is not there's an inherent privilege in terms of who knew about this stuff earlier on. So, but luckily by design, we can then use that system and hopefully, bring real access to economic utilities.
And I think, it's an economic system always works better when all the participants understand it. And I think if you look at any system where only the people at the top, and capitalism is like that to an extent.
Yeah.
You ask people, say, what about the Fed? What does the World Bank do? How are bonds bought and sold? Why are bonds sold? What's M1? What's M2? And you start asking people questions, they say, hell, I don't know.
You ask them something even simpler. How does trickle down work?
Yeah, how does trickle down working for you? And I think when people are kept in the dark, it doesn't have a good outcome for everyone, but just for some people. I think one of the things I see with DeFi, decentralized finance, is that, we talk about reversing the flow of ownership. And I think it forces people to learn, about decentralized finance. What is blockchain? What is, proof of work versus proof of stake? And it forces you to learn about that because your money's at stake. So in a way, I think it's good because everybody doesn't get exposed to, a lot of financial, economic philosophy, how the world runs and, how money goes and what, stagflation means. A lot of people don't get exposed to that. And I think it's mostly people that are just fortunate to go to certain schools and take certain, just like you said, blockchain is taught, to computer science majors, and it's just everybody doesn't get exposed to that.
Right.
So I think one thing that DeFi forces you to do, it forces you to do your own research, and to learn about things. And I see a lot of people doing that,
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, where'd you learn about that? I said, well, so
right.
and I got this from over here, and I heard people talking about, short squeeze and stuff, and I didn't even know this is my barber, money made from short squeeze, and I know Dogecoin is just a piece of junk, but I bought it when it was 8 cents, and now I'm cool,
Right.
2 barber chairs, and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's forcing a lot of people to do research and to become more knowledgeable, which I think is a good thing because as the blockchain, as more things move to the blockchain, and we've talked about this before. I even foresee the day maybe when voting is on a blockchain. If you worry, everybody says they're worried about cheating at the polls. Well, everybody's got a national number, your social security number. You could go on a blockchain and ensure that everybody gets one vote.
Yeah.
And there would be a ledger, and you couldn't cheat. So that's just one thing. But I see, decentralized finance as being economic systems have probably the most effect on society than any other one thing.
Yeah.
Because economic systems, by the very nature, are political systems.
Right.
And regardless of, China, they call it communism, Russia, they call it socialism, and, they call it capitalism. It's all capitalism around the world.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
the only way that these economies compete on the global level is through capitalism, right? They're all of us have hybrid governments that they kind of pick and choose from which system to grab what, right? I mean, there's plenty of socialist things here in the US, and obviously people pride themselves. They think that the US like invented democracy or something, but
they say, well, I hate socialism, but I didn't get my social security check and I'm pissed off.
Yeah, I was in a public park the other day complaining about socialism and in the suburbs.
Yeah. How about that?
When I had to go pick up my kid from the public school, and there was a trash can on fire, so I called the fire department, and they came out for free.
Yeah. I paid too many taxes with my unemployment check for you not to be here in 2 seconds. Those are all socialist programs. But I think what happens is, you you give something a bad name. You know, I know when I was coming up, the worst people in the world were communists.
Right.
I mean, I remember teachers saying, "I'd rather be dead than red." And the worst people in the world were communists. I'm like, and Russian. I'm like, who are these people? You know, and then I had a Russian neighbor. I said, he's a nice guy, man. I mean, I don't know. Is there like certain Russians or certain kind, you know, and come to find out the whole world is on capitalism, uses capitalism, whether they call itself communist, socialist,
Yeah. And some of them have authoritarian regimes.
democracies, you know, which is, you know, which is being challenged. All democracies around the world really.
Right.
And it's not.
Well, yeah, we see far right uprisings, neo-Nazi uprisings in Italy, Germany, Poland. I mean, there's a huge push right now because there's so much imminent change that you see the conservative side fighting desperately to conserve what they think is being taken from them, right? And this,
it's no
huge
accident
change.
that they're all happening at the same time.
Right.
Because
Right on schedule.
yeah, we know what social media can do with your data.
Yeah.
You know, they can manipulate you, and they can make me feel a certain way and make you feel a certain way. And the thing that really boggles my mind is that our elected officials in the United States are like, they're like the dumbest people in the world when it comes to technology. And I remember when they had Zuckerberg on Capitol Hill, he was trying to explain the internet. I'm like, this guy's been a senator for
just basic advertising. I mean, basic 21st century advertising.
Oh,
they were like, what? Like,
yeah, and they just did not get it, man. You know, surveillance capitalism. What is that? Is that a
like, I thought we just had surveys at the mall. Isn't that?
Yeah, they just don't get it. So I think you know, one of the things that we try to do with this show is to educate people, you know, and you know, our address, if you want to communicate with us, is the DeFiCollective.com, you know, and we'd like to hear if you're a old crypto OG, if you've been in crypto for longer than 5 or 6 years, we'd like to hear from you. You know, and that's the DeFiCollective@gmail.com. And also we're on YouTube under Let's Talk Radio with a Y, RADYO, under the DeFi Collective. So, you know, if you're a crypto OG, we'd like to hear from you. Because we'd like to get some thought on how you feel that decentralized finance is affecting society. Because every time, you know, there's a new economic system, there's like upheaval in society, and society goes through changes. You know, there was with slavery, there was with mercantilism. You know, in Spanish, you know, was mercantilism was a system where you had to always had a balance of trade, where the other guy always owed you more than you owed him. And everything was based on gold. And they went to South America, and a lot of ships sunk because they had so much Mexican gold and Central American gold, and they couldn't get back to Spain. So a lot of those ships are sitting a couple miles below the Pacific Ocean, you know, Atlantic Ocean, I'm sorry. And you know, you had feudalism, you know, where there was no pretense of a middle class. You know, it was landowners and serfs. You know, you had manorialism, where you know you had kings and queens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you were either royalty or you were crap. You know, there was no in between. So capitalism came along, and for a while, socialism and capitalism had a sort of a middle class. You know, which seems like really is not seems, but is really shrinking now.
Yeah.
And I think decentralized finance is one of the economic system that might be able to counteract some of that, because there's a lot of benefit to having a vibrant middle class. You know,
right.
Then the people in the upper class that sell things will have people that can buy them, you know, without using credit. I think when we went off the gold standard in 71, and they started sending everybody credit cards and everything.
Free money.
Credit, you know. I said, well, how are they going to buy? He says, we'll just finance it. We'll finance the house for 40 years. Say, but they'll be dead before they pay it off. Who gives a shit? You know, we don't care. We'll get all that interest.
It's constant income for them, right? Constant revenue.
Money doesn't really get created until there's interest paid on the money.
Right.
You know, it's all paperwork and digital assets, you know, and the computer programs until.
And how they became more profitable was exactly that. It was the algorithms to predict who is going to be able to still pay us while never being able to pay it off? And that's the predatory nature of credit, where like, you know, people can go to school, they can get all furniture that they want, brand new TVs, they can get all these things with credit cards with points. And like in the process, they're just loading up credit that they'll never be able to pay off this debt. And that's the business model of it. They're the most profitable customer because they'll still have income or whatever to pay that off, you know, pay every month.
They'll
But
give you credit. I remember back in before the I'm going to say 2002, 2003, 2004, before the real estate crisis. I mean, you could go out. I had a job in a position where I saw people's credit to make decisions about lending. And there were people that would come in that owned 30 houses. And they would, you know, they would say, because then, you know, where was a countrywide mortgage? You know, if you had a 700 credit score, they financed you. They didn't ask any more questions. So you could buy these houses, you know, and you could say the house is worth 100 grand. Maybe it's worth 50, maybe it's worth 20, you know, and a lot of people, you know, a lot of them went to jail, you know, the savings and loan crisis, I guess it was called, you know, but it used to boggle my mind how they would give somebody 20 and 30 loans on a house when they know they couldn't possibly, you know, the house, you know, it was going to crumble at some point. But like you said, they were credit, and every time all they had to do was make a payment, you know, on 29 or 28 of those houses to keep their credit score above 700. And the bank was happy. The mortgage companies were making a ton of money.
Right.
You know, until they couldn't pay, and then the whole bubble kind of burst, you know.
Yeah, right. Until all of a sudden we have a major problem in terms of, you know, distribution of that. And it's.
Yeah. So I guess in closing, I just want to say, I think anytime there's new economic system or new economic activity, governments want to get involved because they want to tax it. You know, I think I told you last week, I stopped to get gas, and the first thing I saw was state tax, 38 cents per gallon, you know, federal tax, 21% a gallon. So you're going to pay us 60 cents even if we give you the gas free, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in governments, they want a piece of that action from Bitcoin, you know, and by the very nature of decentralized finance, how do you think that gets resolved?
I think the resolution is going to be compromising on some regulation, right? You know, a lot of people in crypto think there's not going to be any regulation, but I think that's unrealistic. You know, I don't think institutions and governments are going to topple over. I think we really just have to make sure that we're involved. I think we talked about this last week too. Make sure that we're involved as much as possible in communicating and advocating for and talking about and, you know, being in touch with representatives, because crypto and blockchain is all about ownership, right? Like you were mentioning, this is good because people will have, by design, we have to know more about how it works. You know, there's no centralized entity to just do it for you, because those centralized entities that just do it for you are very expensive.
Right.
So when you remove that,
we
have to do it.
That's right. Yeah. So, well, once again, you know, always great chatting with you, Alex. I get to pick your brain for 1 hour for free every week, and that's a good thing. You know, but we just want to say, you know, thanks for tuning in. And again, this is the DeFi Collective at gmail.com if you want to reach us. And like I say, you crypto OGs, we want to hear from you because we want to start. We want to talk to people who've been in this game for 5, 6, 7 years, who've seen these ups and downs before and have seen the growth in decentralized finance. But one thing I think we can say is that, you know, it's here to stay. You know, it's not going anywhere. And it's going to continue to reverse the flow of ownership.
Yeah.
So, you know, someday when the government says you can pay your taxes in Bitcoin, don't do it, because then they'll have all the Bitcoin. Would you say it's a fair assessment?
Yeah, they may try to incentivize people to hand it over, right? And then governments will have majority stakes of currency that we're supposed to own, right? So you definitely want to avoid that.
Yeah, so that's part of the
Yeah.
regulation that we talk about,
Yeah.
So. Well, once again, in closing, want to say thanks for letting us into your homes. I appreciate you spending some time with us. Alex, you got any closing thoughts?
No, I think we did a good job this week.
Okay. Well, so long until next week. This is Robert Vaughn and Alex Jewell from the DeFi Collective, and we'll talk soon. Have a great day.